thank you so much for joining, guys. So basically what we do is we actually plan every 6 months roadmap for Guardian moving forward. So what we do is we would request your help in prioritizing the worker items, what we have in today's agenda and tomorrow's as well. So what we do is we just go over each of the worker item. As we have 80 items, we just make sure that we just go in a brief just to make sure that you have an idea of what is coming up, and then it would be easy for you to prioritize this. We would also be sharing an Excel sheet where you can add your priorities to each of the worker item. You'll have a kind of a title and then the ticket link and then your priority to it. We would be doing that at the end of tomorrow's session, but we would like to need your help to prioritize this and make sure that all the items which are at a higher priority from the community of Guardian, we prioritize that at first in our next 6 months, which is starting from August and which will end by Jan. So that is what our agenda for today is. It would be helpful for us and you guys to achieve the main priorities and the worker items for Guardian, what you would like to see in the further 6 months of roadmap.
One thing as we get into the tickets, some of the tickets may be technical, some of them may be here to enable simple things like UI or user experience. If you have questions, there are no bad questions throughout this. There's going to be, if you don't ask questions, we'll keep going through it and it'll get a little dry. So if you do want to ask, why do we do this? Who proposed this? Those are all great questions, and what's the purpose, so that you can better understand it for your own scenarios and use cases. At the end of this process, we're going to ask you to vote and prioritize. And so if you're able to say this is a low, medium, high, I need it in 3 weeks, 6 months, a year, those are really helpful for us to put those priorities in place and solve the things that the community needs the most at the very beginning of this roadmap and 6-month process. Throughout that 6 months, we generally check in with all the key sponsors and stakeholders who give us feedback and say, okay, at this time, this is coming in the next month or two. We want to make sure this is perfect for your situations or what you need and your requirements. And so if you can give us feedback, that's fantastic. And if it's too technical, that's okay. There'll be some things that are more business oriented versus technical oriented. And if you have questions on what methodologies are coming, this will be baked in here too, in addition to other areas. So Prina, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Wes. All right, so before we go to the worker item, we also wanted to give you a quick update on our community, the Guardian repo, what we have in our GitHub. So what we do is, as you all know, or if you are not aware of this, we actually do a weekly meeting every Wednesday, this time at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Currently, we are actually inviting 315 members in that particular meeting, and we are having a large community of Guardian. So if you are interested, if you are not aware, please let us know. We would be happy to get you in that particular meeting. Then I wanted to just give you guys a quick update on the metric. So as we all know that we have an open source repo. So this is just a metric for in between June 5th to June 18th that we have 571 total clones in that particular week. And then we also have 167 total visitors coming to our Guardian repo, which is a huge, guys. Thank you so much. We also wanted to give you guys a quick update on the methodology plan, or what we in our community works with us for the methodology is, if you have noticed that we have a methodology library in our GitHub repo, which is open source. What we do is we add all the methodologies which have been worked by Envision, which has been worked by the community, and all the methodologies. If you are reading, you might find that in the GitHub repo. But what we are doing is as we all also know that we have tied up with Vera, and we are working with Vera on digitizing the methodologies. And so there are current methodology digitalization efforts, but we will be working on, which is VM47, which Evercity will be working, VM48, which Alcott will be working, and then we have 49, 50, 51, which will be worked by Vera and Vision together. We are working on these efforts as well moving forward in our roadmap. So if you're interested, please let us know. Please, we would be happy to collaborate. And then if you are interested in any other methodology, please, you can raise a PR and collaborate with us, and we can add that methodology to our methodology library folder in our GitHub repo. Just wanted to give you an overview of what all we will be covering in today's roadmap worker items. So I just want to let you know that having a 1.5 hour session today, we would be completing 50 worker items because we couldn't complete 80 of them. But still, an overall view of 80 worker items, what we would be covering is we would be actually trying to enhance our technical capabilities in respect to the technical user experience, then interoperability enhancement. Then we would also like to improve our design for the policy development, the workflows. Then we also wanted to automate the critical operations and contract enhancement, then which would increase or enhance our trust and transparency, which would also result in the scalable solution for Guardian. So these are all like an overview of what all things we would be covering in our worker items. Now, I think we should just start on the worker items. So we would just start on the worker topic 1. I would pass it to Andre to just give an overview on the first worker item.
Thank you, Prina. To summarize this work topic, current state is that in the event of disaster, Guardian can user access to information that was in Guardian, present in Guardian, can be restored successfully, providing user keys available and backed up. But what is missing is the ability to restart execution of the policy from where it was previously. So that is what this ticket is dedicated to, adding this capability. I can expand on this, but any questions? Is that clear? And when we say a disaster, we mean a complete disaster. Obviously, Guardian, as any application, we recommend, and best practices generally recommend having backups, having load balanced instances, and so on. Disaster means all of that disappeared. All the databases disappeared. The architecture of the Guardian is such that obviously it stores everything that's important, all the artifacts it produces externally in the decentralized storage and Hedera, but it's got an internal database where effectively it's like a cache. It's all this data is cached in Guardian database for easy access. Some of the data that's transient in nature, for example, a user session information and so on, it doesn't need to be preserved for posterity. It's just there for at this time. This is what's stored in the Guardian database. In the event of a disaster, these databases and their backups and replicated databases, AWS or wherever, Azure, where you deploy the Guardian instance, gone. That information will be gone, and that's why you wouldn't be able to restart executing of the policy from where you were. But the data, the access to data is preserved currently. So it's an enhancement, an extension. Basically, you could call it a live disaster recovery. If no questions, I will move on to the next one. Okay, thank you. So at present, Guardian has an excess 100% API coverage for its functionality. Everything that you can do from Guardian can be done from an API. However, the API that Guardian exposes currently is fairly low level, meaning in order to execute a business operation, if a sort of, let me give you an example, something like create and publish a document. It seems like a one thing, but in Guardian API, currently, you would need to execute a number of API calls to do that. If you create the document, and you sign the document, and then you execute a published document. But it's just an example. There are many more, fairly more advanced operations, and they require multiple stages. And this work topic calls for an implementation of a generic API, a more higher level API, sort of business level API for common tasks. And obviously, we can identify a number of common tasks first. It's not going to like full coverage. It's just a most commonly used tasks across the ecosystem and implement those, and then keep adding new high level calls to the API with time with each iteration. If there are no questions about this, I'll move on to the next one. Thank you, Prina. Yes, so this work topic is an enhancement, more like a clarification of Guardian functionality. It isn't anything that would substantially change Guardian and how it works, but it would make Guardian more understandable by various stakeholders and various users, because Guardian as an open source product has first business users that use Guardian for their purposes, and then various other users. All of them are users or customers or clients or community of Guardian. Development users, some other companies developing, or individuals develop extensions, enhancements to Guardian, some integrate Guardian into their systems, and having a consistent terminology, potentially in different languages as well, because this ticket would enable the creation of different language dictionaries. It would probably make it much more convenient for all these categories of users to do their job with Guardian, with the help of Guardian. Next one, please, Frida. Yeah, this ticket primarily focuses on it's not a limitation really, but it's more driven by the nature of things, of blockchain operations, but it is a particular way, excuse me, apologies, sorry. At the moment, in order to update the state of retirement operations and the entire, because I step back a little bit, retirement of tokens in Guardian can be done from Guardian UI, or can be done from another application, or executing transactions directly on chain without Guardian. That it's done on purpose. It's because it enables a creation of the ecosystem of third parties that provide additional services, for example, matching services between polluters and individuals that create carbon credits, or something that enhances the ecology of the atmosphere. And most of these sites may have different constraints with whom they might work or not, and how they match tonnage of pollution versus the enhancements. Guardian ecosystem implements a very advanced capabilities, most of them on-chain capabilities. And because of this, configuration may change without Guardian or even standard registry that kind of manages this. It can change independently because it can change on-chain. So Guardian needs a refresher. Internal state of Guardian needs a refresher to enable operations of retirement from Guardian UI. And at the moment, it's done manually because these refresh operations cost HBAR. And we can do that, but then you'd be, whoever funds this operation would be bleeding HBAR out. And we can enhance this to make it cheaper or more efficient and potentially free, but it requires investment. This is what this ticket is about, plus various minor enhancements that can be done that are outlined in other tickets that are subservient to this ticket. Next one, please, Prina. Okay, this ticket allows using the new capability of state proof generations, a generation from Hedera to be executed from Guardian directly. There's not much to say further about this. It will enable verification of the state and status, and basically trust chain verification independently without exposure to Hedera directly live. It can be done offline with the state proof. Next one, Prina, please. Yes, it's another API enhancement ticket. We talked earlier about an API enhancement where we would group many lower level operations into a sort of consistent workflow and expose it as an API call to business level operations. And here this ticket is a different dimension to it. Instead of simplifying API, it makes API more powerful because it adds a capability for the API client to specify how to execute various API calls, including those business API calls, whether that API call would be executed asynchronously and there would be some sort of callback or polling happening, or the API client would block and wait for the entire API task, that task that's been triggered by the API call, executed and returned results. So we've had community feedback on this, and both types of API calls are required. At the moment, we've got asynchronous execution throughout the product, and so it's to introduce synchronous execution and enable the API client to choose which one they want. Next one, please, Prina. Yes. So we currently have a very, I think, exciting capability implemented in Guardian where you could capture kind of input and outputs of a policy execution in dry run mode and then preserve them and then execute a different policy or different version of the policy using the same data and compare the results of that execution. So it's another way of comparing policies or policies version. We've got a policy diff that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, where you could see policies side by side and there's the tool highlights the differences and so on. But that's like examining the definition of the policy. And here you can compare policies in action, maybe in time, where you could see your set of data. You created a test set of data for a particular version of the policy, and before deploying a new version and using it, you may want to execute that set of data against the new version and check that your data for you works fine with the newer version of the policy that you or maybe somebody else has developed. But here, this ticket is an enhancement, evolution of the same capability, but rather than executing policies in dry run mode, it gives the ability to execute a published policy and use the results that also have been published, compare it with your policy. So it would enable, for example, a use case where a policy has been published targeting a particular set of maybe projects, and someone's developed a new, maybe more efficient or simpler or enhanced policy, and you'd want to check that this policy that you've developed is backward compatible with the policy, maybe gold standard, general meaning of gold standard policy for this territory. Yeah, Wes, you've got a hand up, please.
Just one thing for folks to consider on this one, being able to replay and compare data of published policies also means that if you have a scenario where the market has an issue with a methodology or a policy, and we want to develop a fix to that policy or methodology across the series of not just one, but many to a new policy, this makes that possible. So we can already pull the data from an existing policy, re-put it through in a dry run in a test case and put it side by side. This makes it so that we can do it in a more automated way, pulling from existing published policies and projects. So for production scenarios in particular, where projects are already operating, this allows us to do that more efficiently and grab what's in the market, what is operating, and compare it to what is being proposed. So even in the case where the CDM or Article 6.2 or 6.4 proposes a change to a CDM methodology, and someone's using one of our CDM methodologies out there for their own purpose, this allows them to compare to what the upgrades are to come, and is a really operationally more effective way to do it than the manual ways that we can do it today in Guardian. Still better than doing it on paper, but this would give us an even greater efficiency.
Thank you, Wes. Next topic, please, Brina. Yeah, this is an enhancement to our import-export from Excel functionality. There are a few more of these enhancements, but this enhancement is a significant effort, significant project. That's why it's been called out separately as a project, because it requires investment of development time, a non-trivial investment of development time. And it's to do with the field names. As Guardian generates, when you generate a schema, Guardian generates field names automatically. You can change them. And with Excel import export, there are complexities associated with this, because some fields are new, some fields may have been changed in Guardian once the importing has happened, and vice versa. Yeah, so this ticket is targeting this particular issue. Next one, please, Brina. Right. This work topic is an enhancement or additional functionality to our tree schema view in the Guardian. We see, you could observe, you could browse and see maybe details, navigate through a schema, hierarchical schema view in Guardian, and it helps you to understand interdependencies and relationships between data that are required or included, data concepts that are included in a particular policy. You also use data tree or schema tree view when when you define statistics. If you remember, there is this piece of functionality there which enables you to find the data types that you need, that you want to use in statistics. And when you define a statistic, obviously when statistic is defined already, then you use underneath this schema diagram to choose the specific documents that you want to be the inputs in the statistic generation. So this ticket takes it further. It enables you to export schema tree into a editable UML diagram. So you could maybe include those UML diagrams into maybe further documentation, or use it for maybe use if you're developing some software that consumes data that's generated by Guardian, that this diagram will also be useful. In particular, you could possibly even generate a database schema based on this UML diagram using the tooling, various tool sets that exist out there for that. Next slide, please. This work topic is an enhancement to our search and diff functionality that we implemented last year, calendar year. This, at the moment, our diff or search is precise in a sense that it's case sensitive, and sometimes it's not required because the meaning of the it's more like a programming concept when it's case sensitive. So it would be good to be able to specify whether you want and how case sensitive your search would be. And obviously Guardian uses a software stack that's developed, open source software stack, and that open source software stack is case sensitive. So this project would require some changes in to the architecture of dependencies and so on. So not a trivial task. Next one, please. This ticket is to do with providing users a convenient way to update data for particular documents that they've already issued. One example here is a contact email, for example. It's not material for any calculations or for even the trust chain, other than it enables kind of have up-to-date references. And at the moment, this is very difficult or next to impossible to do. We enable this functionality in the migrations, but it's more for the new fields, for example, or fields that change their meaning in the new upgrading projects between different policy versions, for example, or migrating projects. But here it is the same project, the same policy version potentially, or different, but just the date is updated. So obviously a verifiable credential document is signed. It can't be changed because the signature wouldn't work, but it can be reissued, and the system need to track a new version of the same document and differentiate between different documents, different versions of the same documents, and know which is the actual current version of the document, like project definition document, for example. So next stage, please, Prina. Yes. So we have done a significant amount of work on formula linked definitions. This ticket has a long evolution timeline. There are many more wonderful things that we could do to it. At the moment, as it stands, users are able to see to understand which formulas are implemented by which pieces within the policy, for example, or which documents refer to data that were calculated by which formulas. Not only that, users are able to find the data using the formula, that was like formula linked graphical definition that was used for calculating the result that is being displayed currently. What this ticket requires us to do is adding a convenient, more graphical view to the tree of data, similar to how we have a schema tree, to easily navigate various data transformations that led to the production of a particular piece of data that was then fed as a parameter into the formula calculations and resulted in the results. Navigating all of this, at the moment it is possible to do that, but it's not graphical, and this is what it's a UX enhancement really, but a significant effort there. Yes, please, Wes.
Just one note on this one. This one allows both VVBs and standards to better visualize the Guardian policies relationship at the top level definition, which is the formula link definition, to going through each parameter down to the data. Because in Guardian, you can both see this and in APIs, it's already, as Andre said, possible, but this makes it visually representative for those who maybe are coming at it from a non-tech perspective and are really just getting started. And oftentimes what we need is building validation and verification body capacity and standard at the program side, not necessarily the technical team, ability to see the relationship so they don't have to traverse technology and we can meet them where they are. And so this is an important ticket for helping cross that bridge.
Thank you, Wes. Yes, so thank you, Prina, for moving to the next work topic. This work topic is probably one of the most popular requests that came from you, the community, and it is to do with the ability to go back and forth in different stages of interaction within the policy and be able to send messages and exchange. So the real document workflow at the moment, and we are hoping with Guardian that this would be less so, because the system mandates data and says what is important and what's not, and automatically validates the data and verifies them. So the chances for human error, for example, or maybe some misunderstanding and so on, are much lower, because the technology helps and guides users with wizards, with then maybe the schema definition, for example, gives you a clear form where you can submit the data, but it's still in some cases needed that a user submits something, a project developer submits something for review to another entity, and that entity responds with comments, and these comments that need to be processed and replied to by the project developer and so on. And that's complex iterative workflow around accepting, approving, or not approving data. It doesn't exist at the moment. You could create that if you wanted to with the current tools in the policy, but it requires a strict definition of what that workflow would be. And almost by definition, this workflow can't be defined, because it may require 2 or 3 iterations, different aspects changed, and so on. So this ticket is dedicated to introducing a native support in Guardian to collaborative interactions between different users around actions or documents. Next one, please, Priya. Yes. Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. So this ticket is, at the moment, it looks a little bit more like a research project for us, because the overarching idea behind this ticket is the kind of making Guardian policy mathematically deterministic, and giving users the ability to express a Guardian policy, or at least the aspects that are calculation aspects of the policy, and by the extension methodology that it implements, mathematical, and being able to directly go from a mathematical definition of the result that is required to all the way to data. there are some challenges, and that we've discussed this numerous times at our community meetings, but we got to start somewhere, and some of the cases at least can be covered by introducing a direct support to evaluating mathematical formulas into Guardian. At the moment, as math is implemented in Guardian in code, right? So you define a formula, and then there's a piece of code that kind of implements that formula, and the code is in JavaScript at the moment. We are currently working on it, producing Python. And some advanced Python libraries, data analysis libraries with it. We've got a ticket literally at the moment. The work is ongoing on this, but it's still a software, a code. But what would be great if you could define a mathematical formula as complex as you like, and Guardian natively evaluates that formula, matches the data, and calculations happen with that formula. Unfortunately, at the moment, the entire scope of mathematics that's required for like environmental sciences, there is no library that does this, but some do. So yeah, this ticket is a step in that direction. Next one, please, Prina. Yes. So as Guardian supports a concept of labels that can be assigned to any published artifact. However, the artifacts are mostly, meaning artifacts as documents and tokens, but there are other concepts within Guardian, in particular policies, like structural modules of the policy that can be certified or labeled by a third party or a user or our author, maybe even to indicate to potential users or community as a whole, maybe the intent or the quality or any other sort of additional meta information that is not included inside the concept definition itself, but is still relevant for the usage of this. And this, you could see in the definition of the ticket there, some of them are outlined like modules, tools, and schemas, maybe even blocks or groups of blocks somehow we can label. So we would obviously define the scope of this ticket more precisely once we start working on it, but the concept, I think, is clear, giving more flexibility and fine-grained control over where labels can be applied in Guardian ecosystem. Next slide, Prina, please. Yes, so this is a request from a community. It's to do with how roles are assigned in the policy. The challenge here is that once the role is assigned, a user can then potentially execute. Firstly, a document is issued defining this particular user with this particular ID has a role within a particular policy. Then being able to change that role requires a rollback of quite a few artifacts that potentially have been produced, but also rollback of the policy steps, because the policy steps they get executed and they never roll back at the moment. Well, it seems like a reasonable request. It clearly is. Implementing in Guardian requires some fundamental changes in the way policy engine works, because it's deterministic and it's one way. It just goes the events, the destination and the source of the events define the navigation of the policy, and there isn't really, because it contains if then else blocks and so on. There's not really an easy way to roll back. We would have to remember the steps exactly, then go back and undo this each step and see whether documents a challenge. And that's why it's here for your definition. So whether you deem this a high priority, high importance ticket, so we would obviously allocate time to this if you choose it to be so. Next one, please, Prina. Yes, so this work has been outstanding for a little while already. We had made some extensions to did SDK to do mostly with the fact that we needed to store data in outside Hedera and store kind of references in Hedera. This is the model that Guardian uses throughout for other purposes as well. And now Hedera did SDK has been updated to merge the two old Hedera SDK Guardian sort of extensions emerge into a standard, but we haven't gone through the update to standardize everything on one implementation. So this ticket is about that. Okay, this is once again quite a complex concept ticket. It needs to be further defined, but the idea is that there could be multiple policies dedicated to different aspects of product being produced or delivered or so on, and it could be even within the environmental ecosystem. You could think of carbon pollution, soil pollution, and they can be different policies essentially. But if you're thinking a little bit more globally, there are other aspects of product production or distribution, or it's just life cycle that can be subject to different rules. And Guardian is a like generic rules engine that can be applied to this. However, we can't, at the moment, there is no easy way to combine them together into a coherent multi-streams policy or multi-policy stream that has a master data that is used across these streams and in a coordinated fashion. And artifacts that are produced are also traceable to do with the same product, so you can navigate and understand the properties of the product across these streams easily with the assurances of the trust chain that Guardian offers standard. Yes, Wes, please.
Yep. And so this ticket specifically is tied to supply chain driven use cases. One of the things that we've heard is specifically in decarbonization scenarios where supply chains are a target across multiple different parties. Something like emissions tracking methodology may be good, but you may actually have other policies such as Schema that you want to put into place, food safety. It could be organics, it could be many others, and you could actually run multiple workflows at a time and have to answer with different outcomes, not just as a carbon emission, carbon or reduction in some way, shape, or form. And so this is one of the base tickets to support these different types of supply chain users, which could also feed into carbon offset or carbon credit related methodologies, but are dependent on things like digital product passports and all reading out of the same data topic with multiple policy topics to filter through relevant data callouts. There are prerequisite tickets on this one, specifically better policy differentiation than others, but that we've previously talked about, but this is just to give a little context.
Next one, please, Prina. Thank you. This is an enhancement ticket to our third-party interfaces with IPFS. There are a number of different enhancements that are to do with, as Guardian relies on decentralized storage, and we are constantly not on the lookout, I'd say, but we are working with various other third parties and partners to see if we can integrate with something else, which is some other data providers. We've got numerous tickets to do with integrating other data sources into Guardian. So not IPFS is the default data source where a Guardian publishes data, but it doesn't have to publish into IPFS only or specifically. So this ticket is just a way to configure interface with IPFS, and there are some implications on the existing setups or instances of Guardian in production currently, and that's why we wanted to evaluate the importance of this for the community, because obviously those that are running Guardians and using IPFS public gateways would have to change their configuration if we were to implement this. Next one, please, Prina. And that is the continuation of what I said earlier, that there are other data storage options in existence at the moment that we could consider. In addition to IPFS, most of them are open source. Some of them are projects that are running under, for example, this Alvarium is running under Linux Foundation. There are other databases, open source as ComposeDB, that is decentralized, the graph storage, the graph database. and so on. This ticket is about introducing support for one or more of these into Guardian, and obviously we need to know whether you, the community, deem this as a priority or as a requirement for you now or in the future. And on the basis of your feedback, we would schedule this for implementation or further review later on. Next one, please, Priyam. Yes, this ticket is in. Yes, this ticket is in fact, I don't know if I can mention that, the bounty thing was now.
Yeah, I think we can talk about it. And I'd even go as far to say is if we take a minute to talk about both the methodology bounty and community bounties, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that can be earned by contributing to our ecosystem. Both the foundation, Hedera Foundation and Exponential Science are funding various bounties. The Hedera Foundation is funding the community bounties for folks to say, hey, I want to work on this, or I want to submit a fix to a bug, or I want to submit a new feature or work on a feature that can help our community move forward, but also meet my own requirements. And Andre, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Wes. So this specific ticket is one of those tasks that are covered by the bounty. We are still refining slightly, not really refining the requirements, but refining our explanation of the requirements. In particular, we're working on a kind of prototype UI, which we would add to the ticket to explain further what is really required by this. But the text itself explains already, but there's nothing like a visual representation of what text says. So the idea behind this ticket is to enable a number of use cases that we've done prior research. Thank you, Max, for doing this. Prior research of practical kind of search tasks, practical information finding missions that various individuals or companies or roles within the ecosystem might want to do around Guardian data that's produced by Guardian. And we've worked through all those use cases and created a definition of the functionality in Guardian that will enable all those use cases and other use cases similar to that. And it's designed as basically a generic search engine where you could define almost like multiple search steps in a single definition of the search. And you can also define the way the search results are displayed. And that's the two main stages, is how do you search, how the results are displayed. And when they're displayed, you can sort and group them and so on. So it gives you a convenient, and then this can be preserved as a bookmark. So you can always come back to the search that you've defined by saving it as a bookmark, because it needs to be somehow, obviously it's up to the implementation how. We've got some ideas how it might be done. It needs to be defined by the parameters in the URL string. And then you then have this bookmark and you come back to the same search definition. You can configure slightly filters if you wanted to, and there's advanced filters that you could see on the right-hand side. There's a listing of different requirements. Regular expression matching, for example, is one of those. Very advanced, I think, very powerful searches for the values within the fields can be made. And then a user would be able to see up-to-date information for the searches that they've predefined previously. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, but I think you need to read the ticket in detail to understand the whole implication on the user and maybe developer who might want to develop it. Okay, thank you, Prina. Yes, this is more not really a functionality ticket. It's more to do with the providing a good data samples for the dry run for the policies, to have a quality test data, which would enable a quicker development of quicker kind of understanding of the policies that exist in Guardian ecosystem and in the repo. The capability, the functionality is there, but the data is not there, and that's what this ticket is about, because obviously providing quality test data is a significant effort as well, and we need to prioritize accordingly as community instructs us to do. Next one, please, Prina. Yes, I think this ticket is actually a broader ticket. Like the problem description is, it defines like the immediate problem, but the actual ticket is about managing access to statistics for different users. So access statistic reports, statistic data, accessing the statistics definitions and my ability to edit and so on. There's at the moment it's a fairly simplistic permissions model that needs enhancements and reconceptualizing even a little bit. And next one, Rina. Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's another aspect of rework of the permissions. As we some time ago, we have implemented a significant enhancement to the Guardian permissions model because we enabled the definitions of roles. We have a set of permissions that are mapped on certain actions that happen in the Guardian. Then these permissions can be grouped to roles, and then the roles can be assigned to different users. However, some concepts are not mapped to permissions, or maybe the multiple actions are grouped under one permission. So it's not exactly, it's not perfectly matching the business view of what permissions need to be. And one of them is recorded here. The other one we just talked about, the statistics, the worker tasks is visible to all users, and maybe for a production deployment in a big organizations, subject matter experts don't need to know what a worker task in Guardian is because it's a low level, maybe technical definition, and maybe only administrators should be able to see worker task executed by different users. At the moment, that's not the case. The separation of duties and separation of data between different users need to be implemented more strictly with these permissions. Yes. So this is a kind of search enhancement ticket specifically for schemas. And we have a number of those tickets. It's unrelated to the ticket that we discussed earlier for advanced search because that was on the data in Indexer. This is more to do with the actual Guardian usage and policy development, policy inputs. So yes, we would just need to enhance the interface in Guardian itself to enable the search by schema ID. And we are seeking your input on or feedback on how important it is for you relative to all the other tickets that we discussed today and will be discussed in the next phase of this meeting. Next task, please, Rina. So here we have it's an API enhancement. The problem definition. We've done some research. It doesn't exactly correctly reflects the first initial statement, what goes on the back end, but changes to the API. Usually, the reason for that is because Guardian UI also uses the API as well as some other products that are out there that already rely on the functionality that's implemented. And in this particular case, it also requires some enhancements and work to be done that are, while they're clearly a useful enhancement, it may have implications. Obviously, it takes our attention away from maybe some other topics that maybe community means more relevant. So we are presenting it here for your feedback and whether you think this is important enough for us to look at today or in the next phase, or maybe we'll reconsider it later when we discuss the next roadmap. Next one, please, Prina. This ticket, I'm not sure what this ticket is, Prina, to be honest. To create a user in a production environment in the Guardian UI.
Just to add over here, basically, we figured that out that there is some limitation in the production environment. When you just create a user, you can do it in the demo environment, but then you have some limitation when you create a user in the production environment. So we would just wanted to enhance that ability for creating a user, any type of user in the production environment using the Guardian UI. Just the UI API is open, but in the Guardian UI, we have some limitation on there.
Okay, yes, okay, thank you. So minor announcement, yes. Yes, so this topic has been discussed internally a couple of times. The topic is to do with cascading deletes, and there are pros and cons to implementing this feature. While it enhances the UX, maybe for users that mean deleting some data, it may cause, sometimes it's not clear maybe what implications delete all has on the rest of your policy, because the dependencies, even if you were to review, in some cases, the schema graphical tree, it can be so complex, it's quite difficult to comprehend. So we've debated it internally. We know it needs to be done, but to make it done safely, it needs quite a significant sort of work in the UI, and you need be presented with the review. Here is what's going to be deleted, these are the dependencies and so on. A significant effort, and that may be the reason why we thought it's a dangerous operation initially and didn't implement that even when we were implementing the deletion initially. It's an effort that's not trivial, that's why it's here, and we're asking for your input whether you require, it's a problem for you that you have to go, when you're deleting a schema, you go and manually have to delete all the dependent schemas for this schema that you're targeting. Yes, yeah. I think there have been some confusion in the community to do with the https example.com, perhaps because this is not a domain that you can navigate. It's meant to be an example of the domain that you may want to use, but clearly, because it's a well-formed domain, it shouldn't really be like this as a best practice, because it's outside Guardian ecosystem and anything can happen to it. So there's a task to replace this with a mask, and we're seeking your feedback of how important it is for you. Next one, please, Prina. Yes, it's not a production ticket as such. It's to do with the testnet Hedera reset, but we are treating testnet and test environments as also a production environment, but a different nature, because our test environments or testnet environments is a service that, or a product that we are delivering to our users, to our clients. Even though it's for their testing, it's still a product that's delivered externally. And for that, obviously, a lot of activity in Guardian ecosystem at the moment happens on the testnet. Not just evaluation, but policy development, testing, and so on. And Hedera resets, testnet resets, obviously can affect this. And we have a procedure where we recreate all the policies and the various artifacts on the testnet once, all the relevant ones, once the reset has happened. But we can implement a restore functionality for you to use for your artifacts, but it's not clear because it's not a production feature. It only helps in policy development. So maybe their ROI for you of our contribution there is not as high as we may think. So again, seeking your contribution with regards to priority of this ticket for you. Yes, Prina, next one. Thank you. How are we doing for time, Prina? I'm just trying to make sure.
We still have, this meeting is today till 9:30.
Yeah.
We still have 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. Yes. So this is an enhancement to our retirement functionality, a retirement UI within Guardian. It is possible to do that programmatically, but it's not possible to do that currently from Guardian UI. Original implementation of the retirement functionality was in Guardian was not didn't have the 100% coverage for all the scenarios, because we were assuming that the retirement and token management, once the tokens are issued as in the course of executing Guardian policy, mostly they would be done by through other UIs, by third parties and so on. But clearly this specific function is missing and is desired in Guardian UI. So it's here for your consideration. Next one, please, Prina.
So before I go to the next ticket, so this was created by Palinda. Palinda, thank you so much for creating. And as this was also proposed as a bounty, So this we are making this as a bounty ready. Linda, if you are interested, please do take it as a bounty proposal, and then you can contribute to Guardian.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, sorry. Somebody, okay.
No, thank you, Praveen. Yeah, go ahead. You can go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this ticket is a collection of enhancements to formula link definition UI. As we've discussed previously earlier, a ticket to do with graphical navigation across the data that fed into the formula link definition. So that was a standalone enhancement because it's significant and scoped into a single feature. But there are a number of other things that currently happen or don't happen that are defined in the exact requirements for this ticket that maybe prevents a convenient usage of formula link definition functionality in the Guardian. It's a collection. They're all collected under this ticket, again, for your consideration. Next one, please, Prina. Yes, yes. This ticket is, sorry, I got a message from asking about playing music, but it doesn't. A WebEx is just has been upgraded, it seems, and sending messages. I thought maybe it's to do with the meeting. So here we are considering the ability to enable a compression, a deterministic compression that would enable comparison of artifacts without decompressing it. An efficient way of comparing published artifacts because of the complexities of the Guardian data management structures, because we've got topics, we've got links, and the various other structures, and there's tree-like structures, and it would be great to be able to compare that in a single operation. So this ticket is here to cover this requirement. Next one, please, Prina. So this ticket as an enhancement, which is relevant more to those technical personnel that deploys, runs, or customizes Guardian, and it's to do with the ability to switch between the networks and also being able to maybe deploy Guardian potentially against multiple network and distinguish between them. So single instance can be used for testnet policy development, and then publishing that policy on the ability to like seamlessly move from development and testing to production, ideally in the same Guardian instance. And right now, this is much more complex and it requires many steps. And there are also multiple test environments can be. And if you can imagine a best practices for production deployment, you'd have a development environment, QA environment, a UAT environment, minimum for, and then a production environment, minimum 4 environments, but maybe more depending, maybe performance test environment as well. That's already 5th environment. And how would you seamlessly transition the same policy across environments, making sure no changes, it can be done automatically and always consistently and deterministically without the possibility for various errors? It's difficult, and this ticket is dedicated to designing such a system. There's specific requirements there outlined on what can be done, but yeah, for your consideration as well. Next one, please, Freedom. Yes, this ticket is a precondition to multiple other enhancements that are in a list of potential enhancements we might take on, as there is a concept in the Guardian ecosystem where there are topics that can require payment for writing, publishing messages there. And we are thinking that this can be utilized for various integrations of Guardian with third parties that are not free to use, for example, data providers and so on. And yeah, Wes, over to you, please.
So there's the specific functionality on Hedera allows you to pay to get access to a topic. That's HIP 991 in a very short explanation, and it can block folks effectively from submitting to a given topic unless they've paid. So there could be an upfront fee to do. There is not a pay per message function as an example. There is not an ability to pay every time you send a message to a specific provider. So it's a pay to access type of scenario, a specific topic, and it's really a pay to access to post, not per se a pay to access to read, but you could turn that on via encryption effectively. And so this question of this work topic would be for the pay to access to post capability. So it may be more useful for a standard who wants to say, hey, I don't want someone to be able to post unless they paid to register, as an example up front. But it may not be as useful on a messaging service for paying a satellite data provider on a per message basis, as an example. If you posted and said, I wanted access to post something to a policy topic, it's a little less bespoke than that. And we may end up as a community having to write an enhancement on HIP 991 if we want to make it more specific. But this is something that's come up in that discovery. So if folks have questions about how do I pay to access to post, that's something we can do here. If we want to pay to access per message request to access specific information, that may be something that can be done at an application level. We've seen applicability both from a pay to access to post data to storage and pay to access to standards. And the third use case is related to satellite data. And that one is the question we are not quite sure yet. But the payment could be on-chain in HBAR or on-chain in a named token like USDC or any other type of digital dollar or other token that was named. And this has really been a driven request from a trend called DePIN, Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks, that has driven this at the Hedera level. But if anyone has feedback, whether it's this specific ticket for Guardian, that's fantastic. If you have Hedera-related feedback of expansion of this functionality, we're more than happy to meet and help work together to propose something back to Hedera to improve HIP 991 at the Hedera level, because Guardian can't per se control that, but our community can certainly be a loud influencer of that.
Thank you, Wes. Unless there are any questions to this, next slide, please, Prina. Right, this is this ticket is here because early on we've made some decisions and assumptions in Guardian relationship between different Guardian concepts like schemas and policies specifically, and their immutability or mutability once they've been created, and obviously the status of those relationships. And as it currently stands, if a schema is assigned to a policy, you can't reassign it to other policy or make it unassigned to a policy, a kind of standalone schemas, because schemas are meaningless conceptually most of the time outside the policy, but not all as well. And there are some cases where it's not the case, as we've discovered now. This ticket, but the assumptions that we've made are deeply embedded in the set of documents that have been already created as Guardian. It wasn't like a mistake, it's just new use cases keep appearing in Guardian as it expands in its functionality scope. And therefore, we've got a workaround this issue, this sort of not hard coded, but strict enforcement of the relationship between schemas and policies. But clearly, there is at the moment some use cases that require a different approach, and we're maybe seeking your input in whether we should invest time into developing a more seamless management of these relationships. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, this is a fairly straightforward ticket. Whether we need to upgrade to a new version of Hashgraph SDK now or later. There are some enhancements in the SDK and some bug fixes. We obviously review always new releases of libraries that are relevant to us and see whether the upgrades that are there are directly impacting us. At the moment, we don't think so, but there are some potential. So the question is whether we invest time into this or not now or later. Next slide, please, Prina. This is another one of those Excel import enhancements tickets. Just to clarify why we have these tickets called out separately, this is because this functionality is not trivial, because Excel is a system that has been evolving for decades, and it isn't a standard, it's a proprietary implementation. and because it's been evolving, there are many different ways, formats, and so on that information can be expressed in Excel. It looks reasonable to the user, but when a machine needs to parse it, it needs to handle every particular case, and you can never be 100% compatible with something that another company has developed. Even if it's open source software, there's always issues, incompatibility issues. To this day, TCP/IP stack sometimes, even though the internet's been evolving for decades, for many decades, there are sometimes edge cases where a TCP/IP stack is incompatible across like implementations of Unix and Windows and Mac, which is also Unix now, Unix based and so on. For Excel, it's even more true. And therefore, we keep enhancing this. And this specific enhancement is on the line here for consideration in comparison relatively to all the other enhancement in this area and other areas. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, that's another one of those enhancements. It was an issue determined by the community. And I remember we had an earlier ticket about the fields and their names. And here we've got duplicated fields as well, the issue. So next slide, please, Prina. This is a ticket that we have defined because when we introduced a policy diff, which we earlier touched upon, it's when policies, two or more policies displayed side by side, and differences between the policy structures are highlighted. At the moment, we use colors for highlighting the differences, which is obviously not accessible if you were to. We try to stay compatible with the guidelines, accessibility guidelines commonly used in the USA, for example. It's quite a popular. In fact, I think there's almost like a regulation that a government agency cannot buy or deploy non-accessible software. And there are some tests, formal testing that can be performed to define accessibility. And because of this, we wouldn't pass that test fully. And we're seeking your input whether this investment of time is required now. Obviously, it is a thing to do for sure. It's on our pipeline, but relative priority is not clear to us. Over to you. Next slide, please, Prina.
So I would like to then give a pause here because we have covered like half of the presentation here, 40 slides. And then as we are just left with 5 minutes, I would now like to open this meeting for questions and see if anybody have any question on any of this 40 topics what we have discussed so far. Thank you, Andrei.
Hi, I actually have a question. Thank you for the presentation, by the way. I don't remember the number of the work topic. I'm sorry. It's related to the creation of new users in the Guardian UI. It's really just a quick question. Is this feature going to be restricted so that only if I'm logged into a standard registry, for example, I can create new users? Or can anyone just pop into my Guardian instance and create an account there publicly?
It would be a user that has user management, basically.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to confirm. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, the way the concept of permissions, just to maybe expand on this topic a little bit. So you've got a standard registry user that has all the permissions, and that standard registry can then create a user, for example, and assign permissions to the user, a kind of a subset of the permissions that it has. And then it can also allow this user to delegate these permissions further. So it's like a funnel, a permissions funnel. So a user, Prina is a standard registry, has a full set. It takes, I am another user that she has a subset of these permissions, and she ticks the box that I can allocate these permissions further. And then I can then manage my permissions and give some of my permissions to other users because Prina gave me the permission to give my permissions to somebody else. Do you see? So that way the scope is defining administrator and then sub-administrator and a small administrator, and it maps really nicely to the organizational structure of any company. You can replicate exactly how permissions are distributed within a company. Do you see?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dwana. Anybody have any questions?
Hi,
So-
I have a question. Sorry, I should have put up my hand. Andre, thanks for the presentation. I wanted to ask a question about the indexer, the advanced search,
Okay.
and whether that would support any user-facing dashboards so that it could filter and group projects.
Advanced search doesn't give you a dashboard. It allows you to specify, firstly, the indexer. As in the open source Guardian, indexer doesn't have a concept of a user identity. Anyone comes in and it sees, like, the user sees the page, and therefore a user can't store anything on the Guardian because there's no identity of the user that's registered with the, Guardian indexer, with the indexer. In MGS it's different because it's got, I think, the concept of users, like logins and so on. So I think, so that's different there. But an open source Guardian that we're talking about here is that. So a user then coming in would be able to configure a search, an advanced search, and the view of how the data is displayed. So you can call it a dashboard because the result of that search, it would be a table. Basically, you configure displaying of fields in the document, and you can then also configure how they are sorted as well. So it effectively is a dashboard, but it won't be defined in the indexer. It would be defined in your bookmark, because it's going to be a complex, very complex URL string there, and you can bookmark it. And from that point on, clicking on that bookmark will bring up the dashboard for you, because the indexer will process it in the same way again, but obviously on data that the up-to-date set of data. Yeah.
Okay, just one quick follow-up. So could it search on specific criteria? Like,
Yes.
okay.
It can search on a specific criteria, and the way I define that ticket, that it not only it can search on a specific, there are quite an extensive language, criteria language that's defined. You could say in the range or more than or less than, and you could specify multiple fields that need to be, and specific criteria for multiple fields in a particular type of documents. But not only that, you could do this and then say, and that's why I call multi-stage searches, and you can say that and then take value from this field of the document or documents that are found and search for this value in another type of document. Do you see? You don't even know what that value is going to be. You can imagine that is basically what you could search. You could say all the verifiable credential documents that have a monitoring report in its title. And then you could say, take a project ID, value of the project ID field from this document, and search for statistics report with this project ID in this field. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. And then display the value from the field calculated result. I don't know what that calculated result might be. Do you see? So you basically get project ID, calculated results, but it's several stages for the indexer to search. It first finds these documents with the values that are matching the criteria that are specified, then takes data potentially from a particular field of this document or documents, and then searches for other documents where the values match these values, and takes the data from there and displays them. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Okay, thank you.
Just to say, that's not implemented yet. That's the functionality is defined, but
yes, I'm just imagining it. I just wanted to confirm that was the area that you described.
Yes, that's correctly. That's the intention of that ticket. And the hope is that there is a bounty out there, bounty funds out there, and maybe there is an organization or a developer who would want that, contribute that code to Guardian and use that bounty. as a reward for the implementation of this functionality.
All right. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Andre. So we are at the time. So thank you so much for joining, guys. We will be again meeting tomorrow. We have a second session tomorrow at the same time at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. If you haven't registered, please do register so that you get the meeting link on your calendars. And happy to discuss the rest of the session with you guys tomorrow. Thank you, guys. Have a great day ahead. And we will be keeping you posted, and we'll be also sharing the Excel sheet tomorrow once we close the session. Thank you, guys.